Come on, doctor. I was just wondering we should bring him up or not.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's an honor to have you.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you, Elvie. And it's interesting. This is exciting for me because I found out I've been looking forward to this meeting for a year now because I remember talking about healthcare at a Yellow Rose meeting, and I remember you and Norma came up to me and said, "We need to get you a Texas tea. We need to talk about it. It's an important issue." I said, "Yeah, very important issue. Very excited. We've been working on this for a year, right, Norma? Trying to get this to come together." And I just found out that this is like the first meeting for this group, and so, man, amazing. I am super excited to be with you tonight. As you know, I'm State Representative Tom Oliverson. My daytime job is I'm an anesthesiologist, so I know a little something about healthcare. And yes, if you start to feel sleepy, it's probably not just your dinner. It may actually be, just a little bit of something rubbing off there. I have really enjoyed the support that this group has given me. The Texas Tea was the first Republican club meeting that I actually attended when I was a candidate. I don't know if you remember that, Norma, back in 2015, and y'all have been so gracious to me, and I'm very grateful. Is what?
Paul Benefit.
Oh, does he want to come up and say something?
He's going to be on. Yeah.
Is Senator Betancourt is he speaking on video phone?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, so before we talk healthcare, we're going to talk to Uncle Paul for a second. Senator Betancourt, are you with us?
I think so. How about you guys?
Woohoo!
Hello.
Can we hear it?
This is so
We can
cool
hear you,
because-
sir. There we go. Yay!
Paul, we've missed you. Where have you been?
we got like a 7-second delay here. It's just like the radio station.
Uh-oh. Well,
Anyway, and Tom and Norma, thanks so much for the introduction. And I love listening to the candidates. It's just like I'm there. And we do have to, let's give another hand to Michael Landrum for being our only civil judge of the courthouse.
Okay, Paul, you're on board.
What's that?
You're on board now.
Okay, great. All right. Look, I'm really glad to see all the candidates out there, especially glad to see Michael Landrum, who is now our only county civil judge. Let's give him a big hand. We got one of them. Oh, it was working, guys. What happened?
We can hear you.
Okay. Now, yeah, y'all have to talk back. If I say something, let me know. Okay. Now, here's what we're off the bottom for Trump in Texas. So that's why you're not seeing any Biden ads. That's why, MJ Hager is doing very poorly because we think she's now down by 10 points. That's as many Aggie fingers as I can get in. Okay. So, right. And the important thing is that, so as we're coming up, I think I've heard it 2 or 3 times in the candidate run that we have to work on the state rep positions first, and that's very important. Now, Dr. Tom does not have much of a race because he won his last race by about 68%. But we've got really close races as far down as Westview, where Sarah Davis is. Lacey Hull is in a close race. And depending upon if you believe the Democrats or not, they think they've got a shot at even, at a couple of the districts up in Northwest Houston. But the number one priority right now is to look at and maintain the existing state reps, and then adding back Mike Schofield, adding back, Justin Ray, and then also holding the Bohack seat where Lacey Hull is. And of course, that implies that we keep, that Sarah Davis returns. Now, the Democrats are so frothy now that they almost managed to, have light a fire on turnout that is that for a while looked like it was going to be even worse than 2018. But we're seeing signs that it's pulling back now. So the first thing we got to do is make sure our state reps win. Then when that's the case, then we can look at everybody taking a shot at whether it's the DA or Stan's race for county clerk, where there's been really a serious amount of ineptitude and, quite frankly, stupidity in the clerk's office, and push that home. But we've got other races, and I'm glad to see JP Godwin was there too, because we've got races down with Russ Ridgway, and especially big race in Precinct 3 with Tom Ramsey. Now, why is that important to everybody in Jack Cagle's district? It takes two people to walk out of Commissioner's Court, okay? And if two commissioners walk out, you get a big tax rate reduction.
Yeah.
And so it's right. That's right. It's critical that we get that going, because without Cagle having a backup, which is Ramsey, it's going to be a really bad day at court. Now, look, we all know what's happened out in the courthouse. I think either Bruce Bain or Michael Landrum that said the place is a mess. It is, from a civil judge perspective, it's a wreck, because we've got progressive leftists down there. But when you go to the criminal side, it is an absolute disaster. Andy Kahn from Crime Stoppers has documented 60 individual cases where people were given personal reconnaissance bonds and also low dollar bonds, and they come out just over and over again. And by the time, it's one thing to say in the United States that we agree with second chances for everyone, but they're getting third, fourth, fifth, or sixth chances. And by the sixth chance, we've got people that have murdered 60 of our fellow citizens. Now, that's what you're fighting for on the criminal side. So we're going to be, whether it's whether we're doing it through social media or you'll hear it on radio, at least you're going to hear it from me. We're going to be attacking on that point, because bail reform has gone too far. And oh, by the way, bail reform has been championed by Rodney Art Collection Ellis, who somehow has maintained a personal art collection at county expense. And, if a Republican had done that, they'd already been out, like all the way out.
Hear, hear.
All right. Now, that's part of not having the DA. So I don't know if Marion Ann Upman was there earlier, but these are important things. But we're going to have to first start with make sure that the state reps win, because they're absolutely critical. Tom, I assume you're there and you can testify to that. I couldn't see Valerie yet or anyone else.
She's here.
But so the polling is moving up, and the first thing that comes up is Trump, and then the state reps will come up, and then depending upon how the debates go, then we'll know whether or not we have a major chance to get a breakthrough on a countywide basis. But remember that we're running against, leftist progressives. We're running against socialists. And when we get to isolate one-on-one, especially some of these criminal judges that are just unbelievable, okay, in letting people go that have serious criminal records. Remember, it was 8 state reps: Dr. Tom, Valerie Swanson, Dwayne Bohack. I'll run them all down. Briscoe Kane, Jim Murphy, Dan Huberty, Dennis Paul. We all joined in an amicus brief, and that stopped Hidalgo from releasing 4,000 inmates onto the streets, because she was going to do it, because this is leftist, progressive, socialist policy. She was going to do it. Doesn't matter. Right now, we've got and Stan knows this, we've got the grandson of his replacements, because it was picked by, again, Rodney Art Collection Ellis to put in Mr. Hollins in the job. What he is doing is he's trying to mail out absentee ballots to everybody under 65, 2 million of them, where people 95% plus clearly can never qualify to vote absentee, because they're not sick with COVID and they're not out of town, because Abbott the governor has put out an extra week of early voting. Now, when we're fighting these issues, look, we got to fight these issues, literally in our families, with our friends, in the workforce. When you're out, you've just got to be unapologetically conservative at this point.
Amen.
All right? Can everybody
Yeah.
do that? Because we have to be. We don't have any choice here. Look, the end result of us not fighting, and that's why you've seen me very strongly on social media speak out against Hildago's, socialist agenda, et cetera, and being joined by other people like Tom Alderson and others. Because Tom, boy, I sent out a tweet, he hits the retweet button. And that's what everybody needs to be doing in the audience, because we really are fighting, and we've talked about this really for where the soul of the country goes. Does the soul of the country go leftist, progressive, socialist? Because the Democrats can't stop themselves. The moderate Democrats are run over like a truck, okay? And in their primary, if you're not a progressive leftist, you're at risk. And if you stand up, and certainly they can't oppose any of the Black Lives Matter agenda or these other progressive leftist, cornerstones. So we have to do it. Now, what you're going to see is you've already seen the president dig in, but they're also now coming out, and we've got 8 states that matter. Okay, let's see if I can get 8 into this here. Okay, 8. All right. 8 states that matter. Okay, there are 4 in the Southeast, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. And then we got 4 in the Rust Belt, which is Pennsylvania, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and I know I'm missing one.
Michigan.
I guess it's Michigan. Anyway, look, we've got those 4 the states. Well, actually, Michigan's not really in. It's really, if you look at Arizona, that's the A state. Now, it's all going to come down to that battleground. And remember, no matter what the media says, because they are clearly as biased as I've ever seen them, there is an undercount for Trump. We estimate it can be as much as 10% or more of the Republicans don't come out and say, I'm for Trump on a poll. They just won't do it. But if they vote the way we think they're going to vote, which is not for Joe Biden, then he's going to have that balance. The closer we get to Election Day, the closer we get to early voting, where people start responding to the polling like they did in 2016. Now, of the 3 amigos on Friday, I was the optimist in 2016. I thought we were going to get 290 electoral votes. We ended up with 304. So we're going to see a bounce, and we just have to stay with conservative principle. That's the bottom line, and just not back up. Because if we back up, we really back up into the abyss, okay? Because when we lose races now, it's not like the Democrat is Eric Andel on my show. The Democrat is either, Rodney Ellis, a progressive leftist, or a socialist like Lena Hidalgo, or there are even people to their left that we've seen down at the courthouse, especially when you look at personal reconnaissance bonds. So, and it was actually a retiring Democrat judge, I think Michael will know this, or Bruce Bain, that it was Judge Ritchie who actually stopped Hidalgo the first time from making an order, because he basically reminded Hidalgo, hey, you're not a black robe judge. You're not really a judge. So stop acting like one. So we can't stop acting like conservatives. It's really, really important that whenever we get a shot at this, that we stay, because the numbers are coming our way. We're off a bottom. The first thing we've seen is the Trump increase of 4 points in the state. Right now, generically, state reps are 1 point ahead of their Democrats. We'll see that come up too. Okay, and when we see that last one, we'll be in debate time roughly, and that's the big chance that we've got to punch through in Harris County. And it's really the chance that President Trump has to punch, out effectively the Biden campaign is going to be in those 3 debates. So with all things, stay tuned. Okay, and I want to thank everyone that put this on tonight, and also just want to say, do not be afraid to call in on Fridays on my show. Do not be afraid to retweet anything I've done. Do not be afraid to suggest more public policy, because public policy is our strong point. It is their weak point. And they want to spend all their time talking about personality. So anytime we can move the conversation back to principle or public policy, as conservatives, we're going to win. So I'm optimistic. I think we're going to hold the House in Texas. That was very much in doubt a month or two ago. And soon as that becomes apparent, as this train starts leaving the station of now Trump leading in Texas, and we can always count on the Democrats not to nominate the best candidates, and they did it with MJ Hager. She's really not come out to be a very strong Senate candidate. So that means when you're looking at the ballot all the way down, you've got in Harris County, we're going to be in a blueberry inside of 1960, let's say, certainly inside of the Beltway. And that blueberry is going to turn more blue. But what we're seeing, and especially people that are walking their districts like Mike Schofield, they had tremendous spontaneous Trump rallies last weekend. And when they're knocking on doors and independent voters getting very strong response, at least Mike is. So that's a very good, very good possibility of picking that seat back up. So I just want y'all to stay the course, because the numbers are really coming up, and I'm happy to see that, because we've got the right prescription for America. When you look at the prescription that Dr. Joe is writing, it's not one that Tom Alderson would write.
Amen.
It's not one that anybody in the room, at the restaurant would write. And so we have to proselytize that and be, clear that we know, like today, school started in all the suburban schools. And I've got a post up that says it's the end of the endless summer of 2020. And my day was bright when I saw a Spring Branch yellow school bus do a U-turn right in front of my office building. Because that meant we get kids back to school. That means single moms can get back to work. And that means the economy is ready to open up one more time, because you haven't seen it in the press, but rural openings have already been, the school districts already been a big success. And so once that happens, then even the urban school districts like HISD will have to follow along, and they've got about 4 weeks to do that at this point. So with that, I just want to tell you, this thing is moving our way, and we hold the state reps. That means we hold redistricting. And once we get to that point, and we'll know that for sure within about 3 or 4 weeks, then we can take a shot at knocking this socialist agenda off at Harris County. But it starts by keeping Tom Ramsey in and making sure that the constables come back like Mark Herman, and the JPs like Ridgway that have an opponent, unlike Godwin doesn't. They all need to come back, and then we can take a shot at literally poking through that mirage of leftist progressive socialism that's running Harris County. All right, so thanks.
Thank you, Uncle Paul. Appreciate your leadership.
Let's win a few of these elections, because we're going to.
Okay. All right. We're back. We're back on. Thanks to Uncle Paul. Let's give him one more round of applause. He really did fight the good fight this year. He punched that county judge in the nose on her mask order, and then we decided to go after that illegitimate county clerk who's trying to mail out ballots to everybody in Harris County. So he really has carried the yeoman's load for us. So we're going to talk about healthcare tonight, and I'm particularly excited to do this because so unbeknownst to me, I got a call from Norma, and she had procured the one person that if there was one person I would want in the room with me who is literally the best conservative subject matter expert in the trenches every day fighting with me. We fought the good fight together last session, and we got pharmaceutical price transparency done, and we banned surprise medical bills. And it would be David Balot. And David comes to us from an incredibly awesome conservative think tank that I think you all may have heard about, called the Texas Public Policy Foundation. All right. You got some fans in the audience. Where he runs a center called Right on Healthcare, which I think is great because it's all about healthcare policy from the right perspective, which is our perspective. It's a conservative perspective, and that is the best perspective. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here, right? Am I right? Okay. We are correct. And that's what I tell the patients in the morning when they're having surgery, and I say, which shoulder are we working on? They say, right. And I said, so right is correct. And they say, yes. So David actually is a dual degreed University of Houston Cougar. Do we have any Cougars in the audience? All right. And he is also a recovering hospital administrator for my good doctor friends, including Dr. Young in the back, who I have cared for many a patient together with him. We know that he is one of the good guys. So with that, I'd like to bring David up here. And what I thought we would do is we're just going to kind of have the David and Tom show, and we're going to kind of do some questions. And the goal tonight is to tell you what it is. We know we're not for Medicaid expansion. So what David and I want to do tonight is to tell you what we are for. So when your liberal friends say, you Republicans just hate all health care, we can say, no, 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 no. We just want health care that works. So that's what we're going to talk about, right, David?
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. So if we stand like this, can you hear both of us?
Let's give it a shot. Can you hear me?
All right,
Wonderful.
perfect.
Oh, okay,
Oh,
great.
excellent. Okay, perfect. And we'll take that.
Hello, hello. Yes, there it is. All right.
Outstanding. So,
Yeah.
David, you want to say anything before we kick it off?
Yeah, the way I start every presentation is by setting the ground rules. We're talking about healthcare. When you hear any politician in D.C. talk about healthcare, and that goes for a lot of people in Texas as well, and we're slowly changing their approach to this. When you hear any politician talk about healthcare, they're not talking about healthcare. They're talking about health insurance. Healthcare is the delivery and the practice of medicine between doctor and patient. And we need to make sure that it is affordable and accessible to people here in the state of Texas and across the nation.
David, so when we talk about what we can be for in Texas, we're talking about healthcare. We sort of begin by saying what we're not for, and that is massive government expansion of healthcare, right?
Correct.
So let's just, so everybody knows, we're not for Medicaid expansion. We weren't big fans of Obamacare. We think that actually limited choice instead of expanded it, right?
It limited and made healthcare more expensive.
And made healthcare expensive. So we like to talk about, we're going to give you three things, or if you're German, it would be three things that we can say that you can confidently argue that we're not only for, but we can actually do here in Texas. And David, I think as we were talking about this yesterday, the first leg of the stool is transparency. Now, when I think of transparency, I'm reminded as a doctor that most of the time when a patient gets health care from me or from another healthcare provider, they don't actually know what the cost of that health care is until months after the care is delivered. Can you imagine if we bought cars that way? So, David, when we say transparency in healthcare, what are we talking about exactly? What does that conjure up to you?
Healthcare price transparency is about informing and empowering the patient so they can know what the rate is going to be up front before the service. You know, the President Trump has been fighting a battle in D.C. and having to do with price transparency. And he got sued by the Hospital Association, but he gets sued by everybody. But in this particular case, we wrote an amicus brief, or we contributed to one, and they lost spectacularly. And the president did win. And price transparency through executive order will be in place January 1st, but that can go away like that. And no telling what's going to happen in the courts as well. So they did appeal. It's going through the appellate court. But we need to do that in Texas. And Dr. Oliverson is one of the few folks that are willing to take that battle on against the special interests.
So let's tell the folks when we say transparency. So when I think of transparency when I'm buying a car, what I mean is I want to be able to see the sales sheet before I sign on the dotted line and know how much it's going to cost, right? So in healthcare, what does that look like? What are the numbers that President Trump's fighting for that we want to see, that we want healthcare providers and insurance companies to disclose?
Let's use a real world example. So let's just say that I need to, Dr. Tom says I need to go have a CAT scan of my back. And I have, let's just say I have Aetna, which I don't. And if I go to hospital A and they have an Aetna contract and they're a single hospital, they may have a negotiated agreement with Aetna for, say, $1,000 for that CAT scan. But if I go to this other hospital that's part of a bigger system, they're able to negotiate better rates, right? So they could probably negotiate something like $2,000 for the same scan, same test. Everything is identical. If I've already blown through my deductible, where would I go? I would go to the place where it's going to cost me $1,000. Or if my deductible is still in place, forgive me. If I'm still having to pay out of pocket, and the average deductible is $5,000. If I have a $5,000 deductible and I have the choice, knowing up front, between $1,000 and a $2,000 payment for an identical test, where will I go? The lower one. I can tell you with over 60% of people in this country, and same goes for Texas, that do not have $1,000 in their bank account, that matters.
So you're saying the negotiated rates that providers get from insurance companies can vary from place to place, provider to provider. So, for example, if I'm wanting to have a baby, because I know we have a couple of OB-GYNs in the audience here. So if I'm a patient and I'm pregnant and I want to have a baby, and let's say I go to see Dr. Morris, and I find out that Dr. Morris practices at Tomball Regional Medical Center, but Dr. Morris also practices at Methodist Willowbrook. Am I able to figure out what my insurance company is going to pay Methodist Willowbrook versus Tomball before I decide where I want to deliver my baby?
Right now, no, and they won't tell you.
That's wrong. That is so wrong. Do you know healthcare is the only sector of the economy that works that way? I can't think of another example, can you, of a sector of our free market economy where a person would be forced to purchase goods without having an upfront price disclosure of what they would be expected to pay.
I've not been able to find another one.
Why do hospitals and providers argue, and why do insurance companies, for that matter, sue the president when he tries to implement things like this? What is their hang-up with this transparency?
Their argument's actually quite funny. They have two arguments. One is people don't really want to know the price. They just want to know what their benefits are, which I just gave you an example of why I wouldn't want to know what the price is. The other argument they make is, well, that's proprietary data. We don't want to disclose what that pricing is because that's confidential. But don't they put those numbers on your EOB, on your explanation of benefits when you get it in the mail? Yeah. It's not proprietary. So it's not a matter of if you're going to get it. It's just a matter of when. Well, we'd prefer to get it up front.
So you were telling me yesterday that, so this was litigated in the courts, right?
Yes.
That the hospital sued, and this was actually, they lost on this deal on the basis of the fact that this EOB, the statement that you get in the mail from your insurer after the fact, says exactly what the hospital's getting paid, the doctor's getting paid, right? So we're just saying we want to see it earlier.
That's right.
When we could actually do something about it. Y'all remember when we passed that bill where we told the freestanding emergency rooms, you have to tell the patient ahead of time if you're in the network or out of the network, no more, we take your insurance? It's kind of like that, isn't it?
Yeah. It's exactly like that.
So let me ask you something else. The second leg of the stool that you and I like to talk about is affordability. Do you think, before we sort of dive into that, does transparency have a role as far as improving affordability for the average patient?
It is the most substantive thing we can do when it comes to affordability, because we can make decisions. If you look at, we have a tool at the Texas Public Policy Foundation. We have, if you go to texaspolicy.com/ROH for Right on Healthcare, we have organizations who have listed their prices on their website. So the Surgery Center of Oklahoma, for example, if you want a knee replacement or an ACL repair, their pricing is there, and it's usually 10% of what they charge in the hospitals.
You know, it's funny you say that, because I will tell you, as an anesthesiologist, and Dr. Young can back me up on this, and Dr. Morris probably as well, it is cheaper in this country to have breast augmentation surgery than it is to have breast biopsy surgery. Yeah. And the only reason for that is because insurance doesn't pay for cosmetic surgery. And so my rates, the surgery center's rates, the surgeon's rates are carefully negotiated, and there's downward pressure constantly on those rates by the
Yeah.
patients that are saying, well, I'm only going to this surgeon at this facility with this anesthesia provider to have surgery if I think there's value,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
Because if there's not value, I'm going somewhere else.
That's
if
right.
you're going to charge me $10,000 and they're going to charge me $3,000, you better justify that $7,000 differential, right?
You know, it's like a normal market purchase. It's value in exchange for some kind of monetary service or a good.
So I get the impression, though, when you said affordability, and we've talked about this, that so transparency helps and significantly improves affordability, but there are other ways to improve affordability as well, right?
Right.
You had mentioned to me the other day about competition. Let's talk about competition. How do we improve competition in a marketplace of healthcare in order to improve affordability?
Well, we have an issue across the country, but particularly.
I'll take your questions at the end. I promise you we'll have questions at the end.
You know,
So we're talking about competition.
Yeah, competition. Well, you know, when you look at supply and demand, we've obviously got a demand. That's not going to change. But we have precious few physicians in the state of Texas, and we make it very difficult for them to come into the state. And one of the things that we're going to look to do in the next session is to have reciprocity for licensure of medical doctors. We do it for a lot of other licenses, but we want people to come to Texas. If you have a license in good standing in the state that you practice, come to Texas. And that will help also with this proliferation of telemedicine as well. So we need to have as many types of providers and facilities offering these services because we do have regional monopolies. You know, in Houston, you've got the Memorials and the Methodists and the St. Luke's, and they've got the market. When you think about children's hospitals, you've got Texas Children.
I don't think the folks here know this. Some of them probably do. But I wonder, are you all aware that many doctors now are actually employed by healthcare facilities? Did you know that I have OB-GYN friends who work at hospitals that are less than 10 minutes from here, that their employer is actually the healthcare facility, which also insists that they do all of their cases and all of their work at that facility. And it's sort of an in-house thing. Is that a model that's likely to lead to competition and the lowest possible price?
It's the farthest thing from competition. And prior to the implementation of Obamacare, the number of physicians employed was 30%. Now it's closer to 60%. And although those hospitals have to give those physicians the ability to practice medicine with independent judgment, that's often not the case because their jobs are threatened.
You know, I have heard that from some of my colleagues, and I don't know if some of the other doctors in the room would. I see some heads nodding in agreement, but you know, if the facility that employs you just got a new MRI machine, and you're an orthopedic surgeon, you better be using that MRI machine.
Some of the
Am I
most
right?
expensive words in healthcare is go have that image down the hall.
You know, it's funny. So we created these entities about 10 years ago called accountable care organizations. Mm-hmm. And these were ways to save money by kind of bringing everything under the umbrella, getting everybody all on the same team, right?
Right.
And the only ones that I'm aware of that have actually shown a significant cost savings are the ones that are run by physicians. The ones that are run by healthcare systems end up being as expensive or more expensive.
That's often the case. I've run hospitals that were part of systems. I've run hospitals that are part of that were owned by local municipalities, and time and time again, the highest quality, least infection rate, some of the best run hospitals are owned by physicians because they put quality at the top of their list of priorities.
And I'm sure you would agree with me as a hospital administrator, when you're the hospital administrator, what you care about is the services within your facility being utilized to the maximum extent possible, whether it's imaging, whether it's the ORs, whether it's endoscopy. And so one of the things that you really want to have control over is that physician referring behavior. You don't necessarily want the physician sending the patient somewhere where they can get a cheaper MRI that may be just as good. You want them using the one in-house, right? Because you're carrying, as the administrator, you got to keep your facility humming, right?
Which is one of the big reasons why they don't want to disclose their negotiated rates.
I gotcha. I gotcha.
Because that exactly points to why that's the case. Because if everything was listed, and you knew what all those negotiated rates were, you couldn't really depend on that physician to compel those patients to go use those tests.
So we've talked about a couple of other things with regards to competition too. With regards to the insurance market, how can we expand competition in the insurance market? I hear every day that there's consolidation in the marketplace and the number of insurers is going down, and really the number of options post-Obamacare actually went down, not up, right?
That's exactly
So
right.
how do we reverse that trend? Are there some things on the horizon that you see that are exciting new ventures in insurance space, that insurance speak, ways that people can get coverage?
Insurance coverage, I prefer the word coverage because coverage provides a bigger umbrella than just insurance. Cost sharing models that are co-ops essentially, the Christian sharing ministries, and then of course insurance products. Senator Hancock had put something in the last session that allowed for high risk pools. That's an option that will trigger if the ACA, well, I should say when, because our lead counsel who was suing the ACA at TPPF doesn't like me to use the word if, because he's
I'm familiar with that bill.
Yeah.
You know who the House sponsor of that bill was, do you?
I may have a guess. I didn't want to give you too much credit tonight.
Yeah, that was a good piece of legislation.
Yeah.
So what he's selling you is, so when your liberal friends say, that darn mean old Attorney General of Texas is trying to do away with the ACA, do you know if that happens, everyone in Texas that has pre-existing conditions will not be able to get health care? Is that true?
That's absolutely not true.
It's not true, right? Because we reauthorize the high-risk pool in the event that happens.
Well, you look at
So
what's
that's
happening.
done.
Look at what's happening right now with COVID. People becoming unemployed, losing their employer-sponsored insurance. Have they gone without health care? Politicians would have you say that that's the case. There has been just a surge to go into the cost-sharing models, to the Christian sharing ministries, and then one other innovation that really is not talked about, but it's growing by leaps and bounds, and that's direct primary care.
Oh, I love direct primary care. Tell me more about that, just for the folks here. What's the advantage? How does direct primary care different than traditional primary care where I hand over my insurance card at the end of the visit and they run it?
Let me see. Well, that doesn't happen in direct primary care.
It doesn't. Why not?
Well, let me check and see. Let me see by a show of hands. Who knows what direct primary care is?
All right.
Wonderful. Oh,
Good,
well,
good.
this is great because I get to tell you about it. Direct primary care, many physicians who have just gotten tired of being in the rat race, of having to be a data entry clerk for insurance, which let's just talk about that. Have you noticed over the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years, your doctor used to be looking at you, facing you. They touch you every once in a while, and more, the amount of time that you have is less and less, and they're facing a wall pounding on a keyboard. They've been relegated to highly paid data entry clerks for insurance companies because those are billing records. That's not why they went to school. So a lot of primary care physicians have said, I'm done, I'm third party free, and I'm going to have a membership subscription service. So think Netflix. Is it expensive? No. I use it for my entire family. It's nationally, it's anywhere from $60 to $80 a month.
Wow,
And
I
it's
wonder how much they're paying in premiums per month.
No premiums. And
Oh, no, I mean traditionally. What would that compare?
the average, my goodness.
Are we talking hundreds, thousands?
The average family in the United States pays $23,000 a year in premiums.
Wow.
They could buy a brand new VW Jetta every single year.
Okay, so now direct primary care is not just the ability to see the doctor when you need to, though, right? Because that was sort of the old concierge medicine, but that doctor's actually out working for you as well, right?
yes.
The doctor's out negotiating with labs and imaging
Yeah,
and getting you the best possible deal. Is that right?
That's exactly right. So I use direct primary care.
Okay.
And so when I had Blue Cross and I needed a lipid panel with insurance, that was a $350 test. The doctor ordered the test, same panel, but he charged me for what his cost would be with LabCorp. It's $45.
Wow. Wow.
CAT scans are $250. MRIs are $400.
Wow. So we can do that already in Texas, but there
Yes.
is something that you and I worked together on last session that fell a little short, courtesy of,
Yes.
of Chairwoman Senfronia Thompson, right?
Yes.
What was that?
You know, there's really no. Texas is one of 5 states in the country that does not allow physicians to sell medications out of their office at the point of care. Believe it or not. Now, when you buy medications for cash from a physician who has a deal with a wholesaler, you're buying that medication for pennies a pill.
I think it was pretty funny because if I remember, you may remember this too, when this bill was being laid out in front of committee, Chairwoman Thompson was like, well, I take a diabetes medication and it costs me, $130 a month or something like that. You remember this?
Yeah.
And there was a direct primary care physician sitting in the front row, and he was listening to what she said, and I guess she told him what medicine it was or something like that. When he gets up to testify, he goes, ma'am, I just want you to know, Madam Chair, I priced that drug out, and if you were my patient, you came into my clinic, and I filled that prescription for 30 days, it would cost you $6.32. Right?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, that's tremendous savings. And, prescription drugs are the fastest growing segment of healthcare costs, is what I read. Is that right?
They are, because the president's doing everything they can to bring down the price of drugs, but we have a bloated system, and they do not want to give up their influence or their existence, and we're looking to see how we can really shine a light on that broken system so that there can be transparency and there can be an outrage, and so that folks can really make an impact for the betterment of affordability.
So the other thing that you and I talk about a lot, and this kind of ties back to as we're talking about, and this, I don't know if this is one of our 3 legs. It may not be, but I'll throw it in here anyway because it ties into the whole Medicaid argument. We talk about accessibility. You said something at the beginning. You said, I don't like to talk about insurance. I like to talk about coverage. And you and I have almost always when we meet, it's like our greeting, almost like 2 Christians kind of drawing the fish in the sand. We like to say to each other, coverage does not equal care.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
So how do we improve accessibility under some of these ideas that we're talking about here? Does direct primary care improve accessibility when a patient needs to see a doctor?
Well, let's talk about Medicaid.
Okay, let's talk about
If we could. One of the bills that you'll be seeing in this coming session is a pilot program that will allow Medicaid patients to see a direct primary care physician. Now, under the SNAP program, which is food stamps, we give those folks a spending card for them to go and get the food that they need. They go to in-network grocery stores, right? No, there's no such thing as in-network grocery stores. That's only a healthcare thing. But we
that was a joke. You're supposed to laugh.
Yeah, those fell flat. I'm a policy guy. I'm not
Sorry
a comedian.
about that.
Yes.
Policy joke.
I don't get out much. So what we want to do is we want to give these individuals a spending card. Find a direct primary care doctor that you'd like to go see. Establish what that contract's going to be. Bring it back to the state. Have them provide you with a spending card, and you have 24/7 access to a physician.
Wow, that sounds too good to be true. Now let me ask you something.
But if I could say
one
one more
ahead.
thing,
Go
just
ahead.
one
Yeah,
more thing.
Go ahead.
What is the highest level of expense for Medicaid patients? ER use. Why? Because there aren't enough doctors that are on the Medicaid rolls, and they can't. Transportation's an issue. Childcare is an issue. If they can make a phone call to say, "Hey, look, doc, I've got an issue with this," and they already know them, they have a relationship, they can take care of their patient right then and there.
I'm glad you brought that up. So 2 true stories. So number one, about 3 or maybe it's 4 years ago now, the Texas Medical Association polled its members to find out how many of those doctors were actually willing to accept new Medicaid patients. Now remember, we have not expanded Medicaid, right? So this is just traditional Medicaid eligibility. Only 45% of them said that they would take a new Medicaid patient. So when he talks about them not being able to see primary cares, that's the status quo for the ones that already have Medicaid. Less than half of the doctors in Texas are willing to take those patients on. Now, when I was a resident working at Ben Taub, I will never forget this as long as I live. You talk about a broken healthcare system. I had an elderly gentleman come to the Level 1 Trauma Center in the middle of Houston in the midst of the Knife and Gun Club at 2 a.m. on a Saturday morning. to get his eye drops refilled. You know why? Because if he went to the clinic, it took him hours upon hours. And if he came in the middle of the night to the level 1 trauma center, he could get seen within 30 minutes. And he could be out the door because it's 2 in the morning. Not many people. Is that a cost-effective utilization of healthcare?
It's one of the biggest cost drivers of healthcare, and particularly for the state. And that's not an exception to the rule. That's fairly common.
So how else can we improve a patient's ability to access the system? Are there other things we can do outside of direct primary care that you can think of that would be helpful?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've talked about a lot of them. We talked about transparency. We talked about, look, access is a function of affordability. If people can afford healthcare, they have access. The story that I mentioned Surgery Center of Oklahoma. They've got a great site. I'd encourage you to go look at them. There was a woman in Georgia that needed to have a surgery. Her employer was going to pay for it, so she was looking to shop around. The hospital charged $45,000. They said it's $45,000 for the surgery. That's just the hospital component. So she went online, did some research, found Surgery Center of Oklahoma, which we have our own version in Texas, the Free Market Surgery Center of Texas. And she went online, found her surgery on their website. They have their price right there. Anybody have a guess?
I heard $6,000 over here.
$3,600.
Oh, wow.
And that wasn't so $45,000 for the hospital only. Didn't include anesthesia and doctor. The $3,600 was one bundled price for everything.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That is.
So having that affordability will really improve access.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the other things that I hear about all the time, I don't know if you want to comment on this.
Yeah.
I've heard that a third of every dollar, 33 cents of every dollar we spend on healthcare gets gobbled up by administrative costs.
I think it's more
So
than
when
that.
people say, well, how can it be that cheap? It's $45,000 here. How could it be $3,600 here? Do you think, is that coming because basically it's sort of patient talking directly to provider like you would if you were buying a car? Instead of going through like 12 middlemen, including the PBM and the plan administrator and the insurance company, and the patient has no idea of knowing where do those savings come from?
There's no doubt that there's efficiency and there's more of a direct relationship, but not $40,000 worth of difference.
So why is the difference? What do you think that the big driver
They get to hide
is
their
there?
prices.
They get to hide their prices. So we're back to transparency.
We are.
So we kind of come full circle.
It's to me, it is the key issue. They don't get to hide their prices. And we're gonna bring some transparency to a broken system.
So the last thing is, you and I talked about this as well. We like to talk about giving patients a feeling of control,
Yes.
a sense that they're the ones driving their own health care.
Yeah.
What does that look like in the Oliverson Blott, right on healthcare world? What can we do to improve a patient's ability to be in control?
Can I talk about some polling that we did?
Yeah.
We did some research, and we polled folks that were very much on the left and folks that are very much on the right. And it was interesting because the folks on the left had a trust of government and a distrust of insurance. Folks on the right had a trust of insurance but a distrust of government. And you know what? They were both right to distrust because government and insurance are taking away the individual's ability to be their own agent, to be empowered, to have some level of control. People wanted to feel like they were in control of their situation. But not only that, they wanted a sense of peace of mind. And so so when we talk about transparency and affordability and accessibility, those all play into that empowerment. And the insurance companies, the reason they don't want you to see those things is because they want to be in charge. They don't want you to be in charge.
So when we say, and this is sort of the coup de grace, right? So you and I like to dream big. So we're talking
Always.
about transparency, DPC, physician dispense. We got a lot of really good ideas on the table. But then we had one we talked about that kind of was the cherry on the top, like if we could really reach for the stars. We talked about giving patients the ability to provide feedback on the care that they're receiving. Because I don't know about you, but when I think of a free market system, I think of really two main drivers. There's cost, but there's also perceived quality.
Yeah.
right? You don't buy anything on Amazon without looking at the reviews, right? I mean, my wife's like, we go to look at something or Wayfair or whatever, and like, well, should I buy this or should I buy that? And she'll say, well, I don't know. What do the reviews say? Can we have reviews in healthcare right now under the current system?
In a normal business or a normal market, you need to have a feedback loop.
You do, right?
You need to know what's going on. What does the customer think? What does the customer say? Sometimes you don't like what they have to say, but that's an opportunity to improve.
It is. It
Yeah.
is. I mean, people are willing to pay more for things that have tremendous value.
Well,
But if
sure.
you don't have a way to assess value, how do you know that it's worth it?
That's exactly right. The other thing that I would be interested in, and I know that we talked about this as well, being able to see what a hospital's quality metrics are.
Oh, yeah, for
Yeah, well,
sure.
The quality metrics for a hospital.
So,
Doc-
so
doc-
explain what you mean by that.
Well,
What's a quality metric at a hospital?
Let me pick on Dr. Young. Dr. Young, if I called a hospital, do you think that they would tell me what their infection rate is? Yeah. They would quote some kind of leapfrog data, something that's just very universal.
Dr. Morris is thinking she might have a different answer.
Well, they're going to start publishing the cesarean section rates of hospitals.
Oh,
good.
Well, let's
That was
talk about
actually-
that for a second. Dr. Young and Dr. Morris, what's a 5 o'clock C-section on a Friday afternoon? What does failure to progress mean at 5 o'clock in the afternoon on a Friday? Wait.
They gave you from 8 in the morning till 5 in the afternoon to deliver, and you're not delivered, so you get a
So you're getting a C-section. Yeah, yeah. So I think what we're talking about here is that there are certain things that healthcare institutions should try to either avoid or to do. I see we have 5 minutes. So we're almost done here because I want to leave some time
probably
for
go to Q&A.
questions. Yeah,
Yeah.
we should. Okay, last thing I'm going to say before we turn it over to questions, and that is, David, we don't just like to talk about things. We like to do stuff, right? So how many of these priorities that we've talked about tonight, transparency, accountability, affordability, giving patients the sense of control, feedback, how many of these things are actually going to turn into legislation in 2021?
We've already got the language being drafted right now
For all of them?
for all of them.
Outstanding. Do you hear
Every
that?
single one of them.
These are all doable ideas, and we're going to try to do them all. We need your help. So,
And if I may, just on
Yeah.
that note, we wanted to be ahead of the game. We wanted to get it done now and have that language available. Why? So that we can inform the general public as quickly as possible so that they can be on board with this as well and talk to their lawmakers.
outstanding, outstanding. Okay, questions. And we're going to start. You had a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't have a question, I have a statement.
Okay.
As a medical certified coder and biller, and I was married to a physician for 25 years, it's up to the doctor to dictate and code correctly. Because you can say, I've been in the ER twice for a neck injury, and they coded me at the level 4, level 5, which is life threatening. And I
Right.
fight it. I've helped many people win billing disputes because doctors are not taught how to dictate. They're not taught how to do this stuff. And so when they don't, or when they're not taught this,
Sure.
it's coded up here when it should be down here or in the middle. So what I'm saying is doctors are also very responsible to teach and to learn how to dictate, how to give the appropriate diagnosis. Because diagnosis, no matter what insurance you have, even Medicaid,
Yeah.
Medicaid, they do a flat rate, but if you dictate at higher levels, okay, for example.
Well, if
Right.
I may, I would love to address that because here's the whole problem with everything that you just described. Everything is based on a CPT code and the coding system that is mandated to us by the federal government through every single insurance company.
Yep.
We need to get, and the AMA is the one who develops it. That's the American Medical Association, which doesn't really represent doctors, by the way. But
Are y'all members of the AMA? I don't put you on the spot. Me either.
good.
You got 3 doctors in the room. None of us are members.
So with direct primary care physicians, for example, they don't code.
AAPS, yeah,
You look at some of these surgeries. They bundle their price. You need an ACL surgery. It's one single price. So the CPT coding system has made healthcare really not even healthcare. It's sick care. It's reactive. We want healthcare to be what it is in the name. We want it to be something that's proactive and more well care.
I hear you. That's good comments. I appreciate it. Okay, question here, and then we'll go to Dr. Young over there. Yes, ma'am.
So, I've been, pretty much come to the legislature and testified on some of the bills you mentioned.
I appreciate that.
And, I've been on the physician side and the clinical side, on the medical side, I've been on the lobbying side, I've been on the, hospital side, hospital physician-owned side, all of these different realms, right?
Mm-hmm.
One thing I noticed is that MACRA is not getting addressed, and most people don't even know that MACRA exists.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And MACRA,
So MACRA basically is a system that basically was put in place by Medicare to get rid of the sustained growth formula, which chronically underpaid doctors is basically like not adjusted for inflation over the course of 30 years. So the value of the services that were provided just went down over time. And MACRA was supposed to be the next generation, and it was supposed to include quality data so that doctors and facilities could get paid according to outcomes, right?
it's tied to reimbursement rates.
Right.
Between the hospital, the insurance companies, and what the patient can afford, or what their insurance company says they can afford.
Right.
So basically, then you have a panel that needs to define what you can afford, okay?
Yep.
The death panels,
Yep.
okay? What MACRA did, and Nancy Pelosi had this on her website. She said what Obamacare didn't do, didn't succeed in, MACRA Care solidified it for us.
Mm-hmm.
MACRA.
Mm-hmm.
Not Medicare, but MACRA.
Yeah.
MACRA has been going under the radar all this time. No one knows about it. Hospitals have been trained around the country. Data is collected when your kids are, when you take your children or your grandchildren into the physician's office and they ask them, does daddy own a gun?
Yep.
What the boy was rolled today?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're supposed to collect all this information in order to get paid.
What the boy rolled
Yep.
today? What do you think about, mommy and daddy
Yeah.
being a veteran? Is that cool or is that really a bad thing?
Yeah.
All that is the data collection, which theoretically is private and
Right. So let me just say this. I hear what you're saying, and I appreciate that very much. So let me just say this, because this ties both of what you've said together. One of the real problems that we have in healthcare right now, and the doctors will back me up on this, is that about 20 years ago, we lost control over actually being in charge of the patient care, what happens after the care is provided. And so the business of getting paid now is really more about the business of information collection. The whole reason that we went to ICD-10, we're talking about CPT codes and all that kind of stuff, and you may have seen really silly things like, did you know that there's a code that basically says you got sucked into a jet engine, but repeatedly, like it wasn't your first time to get sucked into a jet? Like, who needs that, right? But there's a code for that, But that's because it's about data mining. It's about big data, and it's not about taking care of patients. And so some of the models that he and I are talking about blow that all up, which I think would be a good thing. Okay, Dr. Young, and then I thought I saw a question over here. Yes, sir. Uh-oh. And then we're going to get the hook here.
Uh-oh.
One of the things, and David probably noticed, is that there are a few insurance companies still that pay based on percentage.
If you want me to.
Say that one more time. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
There are still a few insurance companies that pay the hospital based on percentage. So the hospitals set their rates to get as much money as they can.
Sure.
out of the company. So we can do away with that.
You want to talk about that one?
Yeah.
But I'll just erase and get out of the way and talk to them more. The other thing is the way the hospital sets their rates is for Medicare and Medicaid, whatever, CMS, bump it by 300% for the hospital, 200% for the clinic. But then, when somebody comes in and they want a cash discount, they give 30% off the 300% increase. Call that.
Okay, let me answer that question. There's a question in there. Did you know, this is a true story, I have a good friend. He's a neurosurgeon. He works at Southwest Memorial, and he has a lot of patients that come in from Sugar Land. A lot of his patients are small business owners. A lot of Indian, Pakistani descent they don't necessarily have a insurance coverage, but they have cash. And so what they want to do is they want to be able to have surgery on a cash pay basis, right? So my friend goes to Memorial Hermann in Southwest Memorial, and he says, so I want to come up with a cash price discount based on, let me see my preference card, let me see what the card says the charge is going to be, and I'm going to start redlining stuff that I don't need until we get the hospital charge down to a number that I think would be fair for these patients who are paying cash. Because remember, I'm trying to save them money. So he goes through this whole process. He figures out how to cut 45% off of the cost of the facility charge that the hospital would charge. He's about to implement it, and he gets a call from the legal department at the hospital. They said, "Doctor, there's a problem, and we can't go forward." You know what the problem was? There's an obscure rule in Medicare that says that you cannot charge less than what you charge Medicare. So if the hospital honored the cash price that this doctor developed for himself and his patients, they would have to drop the charge for Medicare to that price for every other doctor working in the hospital. And that is a good example of dysfunctional big government nonsense and why the Medicare, Medicaid expansion stuff is a boondoggle.
That's also called price fixing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, I was instructed by our illustrious leader that we're to talk briefly about the concerns of the day, which has to do with why we're all wearing these masks and having issues and stuff like that. So I'm going to say a couple of words, and then I know there are going to be a couple of questions, and so I want to. Yes, you may.
You can correct me if I'm wrong. So we're at the, I can't remember what year Bill number was, council, the physician dispensary. We were at there, we testified. 1622, wasn't it? Physician dispensary.
Yes. Yes, and I appreciate that you were there. I remember you were there.
It never brought up for a vote.
It did not.
My point is that the voting matters, because Democrat was running that committee, she led right up to the end, brought up all sorts of stuff, she didn't even bring it up for a vote.
She did not. The special interest killed that bill, for sure. We had a good bill. We could have passed it off the House floor. Special interest killed it. Okay, briefly, COVID-19 update. We are winning the war, okay? We are seeing the numbers go down and down and down and down and down, and that is great news, right? And we should be proud of ourselves because we really turned this thing around. Because I'm going to tell you something. Around the end of July, I was about this close to panic mode because we were running out of beds in every place that I worked, and I was thinking, this is starting to look like New York City. This is starting to get bad. Now, when we said, okay, everybody go out and do whatever you're going to do at the end of May, I don't think anybody, including myself, could have predicted that George Floyd's death would have caused 60,000 people to line up in the city streets with the mayor, some of whom were wearing masks, some of whom weren't. I don't think we would have anticipated that young people would go out to nightclubs and just pack it in, and the next thing you know, the virus is spreading. And oddly enough, and I know you're going to find this really funny, maybe you'll get mad, I don't know.
It's a tough crowd.
It is a tough crowd. It's a conservative crowd, which is good because they keep us honest.
That's right.
So swimming pools and water parks saw almost no spread of coronavirus whatsoever. On the other hand, we had counties in Central Texas with massive coronavirus outbreaks that were almost exclusively because of tubing on rivers. Now, I don't know, 100% what the deal was there. It may be because they were all packed in on buses getting to and from the tubing place and nobody's wearing a mask and everybody's having a good time and doing what they're doing. I doubt it was because they're all in their inner tube on the river, although I don't know about you. If you've seen some of these images from the Guadalupe on a spring break day, you could probably walk all the way across the river by stepping on tubes without actually getting your feet wet. So it does get kind of crowded. But we are heading in the right direction. Couple of things to keep in mind. Governor just renewed his mask order. Not, I know. Hang on. I hear you. I'm with you. Okay? However, let me put two pieces of data out there that might change your mind. Number one, I've done some pretty significant research. Some of you have heard me call into Uncle Paul's radio show. Some of you have seen on my Facebook page where I have actually gone to some of the large medical systems in Houston. And I've gotten a data showing how many healthcare workers, going all the way back to March, have tested positive for the virus. It's about 2 to 5%, depending on who you're talking about. MD Anderson was 5%, UT Health 2%. However, of that 2 to 5%, less than 1% of those people contracted the virus at work. MD Anderson had 850 employees test positive for the virus, and only 8 caught the virus at work. Everybody else got it at home, at church, at the restaurant, at the grocery store, at the bar, at the protest, at the beach, at the car wash, wherever. So I know it sounds super crazy, but when that guy said, and we all were just like, when he said, you really should wear a mask at home. And we're like, are you nuts? I'm not going to wear a mask at home. Well, the data from the healthcare institutions seems to suggest pretty strongly that you are far more likely to catch the virus out in the community than you ever would at work. And there's only one reason for that, by the way. And that's because if you're a healthcare worker like me, you can't set foot inside a hospital without wearing a mask these days. I mean, you're not even allowed. I mean, if they see you walking down the hall without a mask on, they will literally tackle you in the hallway. Put a mask on, doctor. I'll get one upstairs. No, you won't. You'll get one on right now, or you're being escorted out of here. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. So the mask thing really does work as long as, but here's the thing. It does. If you're exposed to the virus and you're wearing proper protective equipment, you are less likely to contract the virus, which is important because what happened today? What's the big thing that happened today? Well, the stock market did go down, but the schools reopened, right? Now, I don't know about you, but I want to see the open schools succeed in the worst possible way. I will be willing to go to any lengths to make sure that the schools stay open because our kids need to be in school. But you and I both know that our sweet socialist county judge, Dora the Explorer, is licking her chops waiting for the first outbreak at a school or anywhere for that matter so that she can blame the schools and shut them all down. She is so angry at Cy-Fair ISD. I've been on the phone with Dr. Henry countless times in the last couple of months, and they want to burn them down in the worst possible way. Just to please the Democrats, AFT, and the crazy liberal progressive state representatives that we didn't elect, but got elected last time. We absolutely should, but we also should do everything in our power to prevent those numbers from going back up for at least the next 30 days so that our schools don't get shut down. Because I'm telling you, if the numbers start going back up and the schools get shut down, the wheels will come off the train. I truly believe that. Now, I firmly believe that a medicine that is FDA approved, that is on the market, your decision to take that medicine is between you and your doctor. Okay? So let me be clear about that. I don't think that it's right that the government bureaucracy in the form of the FDA or anybody else would say that a medicine can be FDA approved, but you can't take it if it's an off-label indication because, folks, we do that all the time in healthcare. I use medications off-label as an anesthesiologist all the freaking time. And I don't have the FDA breathing down my neck telling me what I can and can't do. Because I'm the doctor, right? I'm the one that went to school to learn how to use these things. So when it comes to whether or not you should have access to hydroxychloroquine, I firmly believe that you should. And that's something that your doctor and you should discuss. And we need to get the government's boot off the throat of the doctors.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, let me say one other thing, because I'm going to give it to you straight. I'm going to give it to you good and bad. I want to tell you, I have reviewed every single study that I could find on hydroxychloroquine with regards to coronavirus. And there's one thing that I've noticed in all of them that troubles me, and that is that I have yet to find a sufficiently powered, prospective, randomized trial that says that it does work or that it doesn't work. There's a lot of stuff out there, but it's all retrospective. And these doctors will tell you that one of the problems with retrospective chart review is that it can, unfortunately, fall victim to selection bias because the population is what it is, and you're not controlling. Let's say, for example, and I'll give you a classic example. Let's say, for example, you came to me and said, you're a scientist, doctor. I want you to find out what's the most common vehicle that Americans drive. I said, no problem. So I set myself up in front of the elementary school at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, and I count the cars. And I come back to you and I said, I am absolutely convinced beyond the shadow of a doubt that 3 in 5 Americans drive a minivan. What's the problem with my data set? There's a tremendous selection bias when you sit in front of elementary school counting cars, right? I mean, good grief. Why not go to the feed store? What do you think it would be if I went there?
Pickup truck.
So what I'm going to say is this. Be careful what you read and how you interpret it. I have seen very well-meaning doctors put stuff out there on the internet that has not been peer-reviewed, that is not a very well-designed study, and speak of it as if it was gospel truth. And that is doing a disservice to each and every one of you. Our ability to know how to treat disease and how to make people better entirely depends on the integrity of the scientific method. And that method requires things to be reproducible, and it requires the results to be free of bias so that the conclusions can be valid. And that is really, really, really important. So when you see things that say preprint, just take that with a grain of salt. When you see something that says retrospective, just take that with a grain of salt. And know that there are, unfortunately, because of the politics of this whole situation, which are completely regrettable, there are unfortunately circumstances where doctors have sold their soul and basically put falsified data in their research. There have been 2 instances in the last 3 months where studies have had to have been retracted because the doctors fudged the data. There was one that said that hydroxychloroquine killed more people than it helped, right? I don't know if you remember this one.
Lancet.
In the Lancet.
Yeah.
That whole data set was corrupted.
And all the
Was
authors
corrupted.
were on the board of one of the organizations developing a vaccine.
Yeah. So I hate to tell you this because it really upsets me as a scientist and as a physician, because I truly believe that myself and my colleagues are out there learning, applying our scientific knowledge to fight back disease, to fight back death, to help people to live the best, fullest possible lives. But just like any other thing out there, unfortunately, our profession has become corrupted with people who are not doing that. And so we have to be wary. We have to be wary. Questions? Yes, sir.
Would you take the hydroxy, whatever?
If I thought I was exposed to the coronavirus, I would, because I have asthma, and so I would consider myself to be a high-risk person, and I'm also a healthcare worker. So I would, yes. But again, I think that's a personal decision. And when I asked my doctor that question, that's what he recommended to me. So I'm like, I'm going to follow what my doctor says.
Wasn't it developed for malaria?
It was, yes. It was. Okay, question over here.
In reference to the COVID, I've always been told that you, for immune prevention, should be doing right now zinc, C, D, and elderberry. And nobody in my house leaves the house without having theirs every single day, and has ever since this started.
And I think those are all reasonable. And look, I'm going to say one other thing about this, and that is that just understand that this disease is the reason we call it a novel virus. What that means, it's not that it wrote a book. It's that we've never seen it before. It's not like the flu virus that we see every year. It may be a different strain, but we know what the flu does and we know what it looks like. This is a different bug, and it does different things. And I can't tell you how many times I have sat in the doctor's lounge since March with my colleagues, and we've talked about what we're seeing, and every day is like a day of discovery. Every day it's something different. We are still learning. So we do not have all the answers. No one should be standing up and telling you that they're the definitive authority on all things coronavirus, because if they're telling you that, they have grossly overestimated their knowledge on the subject.
Tom, we've run out of. No, I was going to say, I think we're closing out of time.
Are we out of time?
What's up?
Okay, yes, I'm sorry. We're out of time. So let me do this. I'm going to hang out back there,
Yeah.
and if you have questions, I will do my best to answer them as honestly as I can. All right? Yes, I will. For the same reason that I take
do
the
have
flu
some.
virus vaccine every year, because I'm a healthcare worker. And so if I don't, and I get the virus, and I don't know that I have the virus, I'm now risking all my patients' lives. No, it will not be mandated, and I will assure you that I will fight with every last breath that I have to make sure we never have vaccine mandates in this state for anything. Because I think it's wrong to force people to undergo medical procedures without their consent.
You think the ventilators are more dangerous? Because I've heard.
We don't know. I've heard that too, and it's one of those things where I think it's a gray area. I wish I could give you a crystal clear answer on that, but it's hard to separate out because remember, by the time you get on a ventilator, you're awfully sick, and the odds that you're going to die are pretty high anyway.
And then it accelerates the odds.
It does, potentially, yes. So that's still an unknown, but I would say yes, that there is evidence out there that the ventilator may accelerate the amount of damage that your lungs encounter.
I'd like to share something, if I may.
Yes.
I wanted to leave you all with the resource again. We have a number of resources. If you go to texaspolicy.com/ROH, let me also impress upon you this. Healthcare is complicated. It's hard to understand. I'm always available. Tom makes himself available a lot, and it's important that we have people that understand healthcare in his position so that we can have discussions to address real issues. Healthcare is the last defense before we're looking at a socialist takeover of an entire industry. And you know, I think we're sugarcoating it. It's communism. My parents immigrated to this country, and it's important that we keep what we have because you know what? There's no place left to go.
Absolutely.
So it's important that we really preserve it. And I want to impress upon all of you to really pay attention to what we're doing in healthcare and really be involved because we need your help. Special interest has a lot of money. And the only thing that can impress the folks, the representatives, is their constituents calling them up because that's who votes them in office.
All right. I'll be in the back if y'all need me, but thank you very much. Yes, ma'am. Oh, Elvie has a question.
Okay, so some of us are wearing masks, a lot aren't. I hear a lot of boos, but I see a lot of people go, oh, well, not.
She's talking about masks.
Yes, I say some of us are wearing masks and a lot of us aren't. My question is, what should we do about these masks? Should we wear them? Should we throw them in the trash? Should we really think about what we're really doing? And so well.
So I
So
can only
please
give
tell
you
me your opinions
Yeah,
on
I'm going to give you
this.
my opinion, okay? And my opinion is
And
based on
yours.
what I told you earlier, which is which is the data that I've been able to collect from the healthcare institutions where you are literally surrounded by this virus all the time. And that is just if you come in contact with the virus, with somebody who is spreading the virus, and you're wearing a mask and they're wearing a mask, you are less likely to contract the virus. Now, that leaves a lot to be, in question, right? Because what are the odds that somebody in this room has the virus, is spreading it right now and doesn't know it? I don't think we actually know that number, and the reason we don't know that number is because the prevalence right now in our county is dropping. If you'd asked me the same question a month and a half ago when the hospitals were bursting at the seams and we're thinking we're going to have a mass casualty incident going on in the Woodlands where I work, which is really scary, by the way. Not that the hospital is scary, but just to think that Montgomery County would be overrun because, the size of the population is so much smaller than Harris County. I would have said you better be wearing a mask because the odds are probably 1 in 5 that the person sitting next to you is spreading the virus. So it really depends on how likely you think you are to come in contact. And look, that's not just for coronavirus. That could be for any infectious disease. But one thing we know about this virus is that it's very infectious if it gets close to you, right? So I would say, based on what I know as a healthcare worker, I've been working in and around this virus since March. I've been in the room with it countless times. I've probably been in the room with it 300% more times than I even know. And I've been fine. My family's been fine. The cafeteria worker that works in the cafeteria with me has been fine. The security guard's been fine. The nice young lady that sits behind the counter in the ER and takes your insurance card when you check in, she's been fine. But the hospital makes us wear a mask. And I'm just going to leave it at that. Y'all can draw your own conclusions.
All right. Well, if you go to that resource, there's an opportunity to join the private Facebook page, to get on the email newsletter, to look at our shopping list that has all of those price transparent organizations. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yes, ma'am.
And we would not be able to do all the great, wonderful things that we talked about here today if it's not for David.
That's kind of appreciate that.
And so let me just say that the Texas Public Policy Foundation has a way for citizens to become involved. They actually have policy orientations that you can be invited to, that you can attend. And you can learn more about not just healthcare, but criminal justice reform or tax policy. You might even see some people but they need your support. They don't get support from lobbyists and big business and stuff like that, because quite frankly, a lot of times what they're advocating is good for consumers, it's good for taxpayers, it's not necessarily good for the status quo.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh, this has been really, really interesting. Oh my goodness. We could just stay on and on and on and listen to you guys. We do have one other speaker, and where is she? Where's Valerie? Valerie, where are you? Valerie is going to enhance our knowledge on some things. Huh? Oh, we need to get her up here. Come on, Val. How long are you going to be, by the way? Because they need to know how. Huh?
Whenever they spoke, that's how long I'm speaking.
I didn't hear that. Valerie, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Okay, thanks. Hi there. I'm State Representative Valerie Swanson. I know most of you. And I want to talk to you about how to plug in these final days before the election. How many of you want to see good policy passed, like Dr. Tom and David Ballot were talking about? How many of you want to keep your guns and your right to carry your guns places? How many of you want to keep working for better pro-life bills and not have to have your tax dollars spent on taxpayer-funded abortions? Okay, what did Paul Bettencourt say was our number one priority of what we need to be working on between now and the election? That's true, voting all the way down from the top to the bottom of the ballot, but it's Texas House races. Okay, we have the Texas House is millions of dollars is being poured in from out of state to try to flip the Texas House Democrat. They came really fairly close last time. The Democrats flipped 12 seats in the Texas House. We had a very small majority this time, and of course when we have a small majority, that means that some of those people are moderate, and so they don't vote with us, and you're all like, but y'all had a majority. Well, you can't count some of these people who they don't believe like you and I do, okay? We can only pass stuff that we water down enough to be able to get the votes for. Okay, so it is imperative that we hold seats and gain seats. Why do people nationwide care whether they flip the Texas House? Who knows? All of it. This is a census year. I know most of you know this, but it's a census year. 2021, the legislature will redraw congressional districts, state house districts, state senate districts, and the State Board of Education. If they can get control of the Texas House, they can really affect how those lines are drawn. They can throw it into the courts. If we lose out and those are gerrymandered for Democrats, we may never get control back again. We will lose congressional seats. We will lose everything, and they will eventually also be able to take over. It'll be hard to win the presidency. I cannot tell you how important it is. So last time, not only did the Democrats take 12 seats and flip them Democrat, we had another 15 seats in the Texas House that we held on to, but the Republican won by less than a 5 percentage point spread. Okay? In other words, it was very narrow. If it was just two people in the race, they got like 52.5. We are running scared that they are going to be able to do it. And if you are thinking that, hey, I'm going to vote, that is not enough. That's like saying I plan to breathe between now and November. Okay? Of course you're going to vote. We have to have all hands on deck, and we all have to be working. So how can you work effectively? If you are volunteering in a race where it is 60, 70, 80% Republican or 60, 70, 80% Democrat, you are wasting your time and your money. Work in a swing district where you can make all the difference. Okay, are my ladies like giving out, held up your hand if you still need that handout that's 2 pages long and it's blue? Okay, if you still need it, ladies, you got any left? If we could make it just one per couple, okay, if you're with somebody else, if you could pass yours on to back. I'm sorry, I had no idea so many people would show up tonight. I'm really impressed. Okay, guys, if you will work on one of these 3 races, if you could put that first slide up, or am I supposed to? There we go. We have 3 races out in our area that are the 3 swing districts for Harris County. This is our job to keep one district and to retake them because we lost them last time. I don't care whose district you live in, we need you plugged into one of these 3 races, okay? If you work in them, you are also helping everybody up the ballot. So Cornyn, Trump, your Congress, Wesley Hunt, and guys, if hold on just a second, please. If you So you will also help everybody down the ballot. Stan Stanart, Chris Daniel. You will help everybody, and you'll get so much more bang for your buck if you will work in these state rep races. You'll get a chance to explain to everybody that they need to, for the first time ever, they can't one punch vote, that they've got to go from the top of the ballot to the bottom of the ballot. You're helping everybody. But we will lose the Texas House if y'all don't get plugged into one of these three races. Let me go over which ones are the three, and you've got them. You've got the information of how to get plugged in. We also have sign-up sheets. Where are our three ladies that have clipboards? Each clipboard is for a different state rep race. So only sign one clipboard, and please plug into a race, okay? The one that needs your help the most in this county is Lacey Hall's race. This is, you heard Paul Betancourt mention Dwayne Bohack's district. He's retiring, and he is, he won by 47 votes in the November election 2 years ago. 47 votes. That means that was the closest in the whole state of Texas. So Beto, who's made it his new job to flip the Texas House, and Democrats have declared this seat to be the number one targeted seat in the state of Texas to try to flip Democrat. Let's look at where it is. Okay, so Lacey Hall won the three-way primary. She's a tremendous candidate. She's working hard, but she needs volunteers and she needs money. So look right here. This is I-10. This is 290. And then she goes out beyond Highway 6. So, yes, it includes Bear Creek. It goes all the way out to Deerfield and beyond that. It's got Spring Branch. It does not have those villages right there. So I'm not asking you just to tell your friends who live there. I'm asking you to get involved in this race. And you've got the information on your page. Everybody can do something. You can either block walk, which I have done tons and tons of block walking in these swing districts. I've gone to the Dallas area and block walked for Matt Shaheen, who won by 300 something votes 2 years ago. So he's highly targeted. I've worked a bunch in Lacey Hall's race. I've worked some in Mike Schofield's race. And it works great. Nobody's upset because we're at their door. We changed a little bit. We hang out the literature on the door before we knock and ring, and then we back up. I back up like maybe 15 feet. I don't shake hands with people like I used to. So we've changed a few things. I do not feel exposed at all because I'm so far from these people. We've gotten really good reception. It makes a wonderful difference. If you can't block walk, then please make phone calls, make whatever it is, donate, offer to deliver their yard signs when the new batch comes in, whatever. And it's on those sheets what you're signing up for. And so let me go ahead and, but again, Lacey Hall's the top one out of the three who really, really needs the help. Okay, so let me go on to the next race. Okay, that didn't work. What am I doing wrong? Maybe I'm hitting, there we go. Okay. Does this face look familiar right here? Well, of course, Lacey had been to the club, but for years you've seen Mike Schofield. Okay, look at where he's located. This is the county line. Okay, so here's the city of Katy. And so he goes a little bit below, south of I-10, and then he's got all this Cy-Fair area up through 290 up there. Okay, so that's all. See, these three are clumped together. Mike, as you know, was a state rep for 2 terms, and then he got beat by 113 votes last time. Okay? Yes, right. And it should help that we don't have the straight ticket, but that's two block walkers have just been out there volunteering or somebody making phone calls, and we would have held on to that seat last time. So Mike is working very, very hard to try to retake that seat, and he needs your help. So let me go on to the last one of the 3. Oops, must have done 2 of them. David, help. What did I do? I must have double clicked. Okay, there we go. Yes. Okay, so this is the final one. Everybody remembers Gary Elkins, right? Who held District 135 for many years. Well, he got beat last time by a Democrat. And so Justin Ray is running a fabulous campaign in the Jersey Village area to try to retake that seat. And maybe, I guess y'all can tell, like there's 290 and probably the whole Jersey Village area and all that. The reason I list him as needing the help the least is he's had a very, very well-funded campaign, and they have had a lot of volunteers. He tells me today that they've knocked over 30,000 doors. Some of those are repeats to when they didn't catch people at home. So that's why I'm urging you to get involved in Lacey Hull's race or Mike Schofield's race. But we need you. We need all hands on deck, every single person. Please, we cannot just sit back and go, well, I'm going to vote. That's just not enough this time. So please get involved. Sign. Ladies, hold up your hands. Okay, who's got the Lacey Hull clipboard? Okay, if you want to vote, work for Lacey Hull in the Spring Branch all the way out to Deerfield, beyond Highway 6 and all that, see Grace there. Who's got Schofield's clipboard? Okay, Tom, if you can get involved out in the Katy area for Mike Schofield, please sign that up tonight, and we will get those names and all to Mike Schofield. But also, you've got the information how to volunteer. And then Alexi has the one for Justin Ray. So please see her if you're in the Jersey Village area. But I would urge y'all, don't worry about who's closest and where you live. Instead, just, pray about it and plug in and pray for that candidate too. Thank you so much. And it's so good to see everybody in person.
Valerie, thank you so very, very much. We needed you tonight. Give her a good clap.